A lot going on in Buffalo these days as Jack Eichel and Kevin Adams both speaking this week. Different messages from both sides. Clearly some disconnect between the two. Dennis Bernstein in Los Angeles. I'm Dave Pagnotta here in Toronto. And DB, is there any way you see a situation where Jack Eichel starts next season with the Buffalo Sabres?
Dave, are you familiar with the word dysfunction? No, there's no way. They have to cut their losses. Kevin Adams has to call up the interested parties around the draft, either before or just after, and get their best offer and move Jack on. I think you're a situation right now where not only the injury question, but also his effect on the younger players. Down the stretch, guys like Casey Middlestat and Dylan Cousins played well for Don Granado. We'll see if he's going to be the coach going forward. But Jack coming in with that attitude, you have to move him on to a team that he would prefer to be with here in Southern California, maybe the Rangers or maybe another team.
Yeah, you mentioned Southern California, two teams, LA and the Anaheim Ducks, that have already expressed interest in Jack Eichel. We reported earlier on in the season that LA was in the mix. The New York Rangers, the reports of Minnesota, Montreal could kick the tires in the offseason. I'm sure there are going to be 20-plus teams that are looking at this. Where do you see a potential fit?
Well, here in Los Angeles, I've been saying it for months now. I think that's a nice fit. It would take probably a Turcotte, a Byfield, a Velarde, two of those three, maybe a couple of picks. Now, the one thing, the injury factor might reduce the cost as well. But you have to remember, Dave, you're getting a 24-year-old center with only a 5-year commitment. You're getting him in his prime at $10 million a year. It's a great trade for whoever gets him. I advocated here in Los Angeles. I assume that disc problem will be fixed. But I think in L.A. and down the road in Anaheim, sure, Trevor Zegras, Drysdale, some high picks, that could get him as well. It'll be interesting. But I think you always want to get the best player in a trade, Dave. And certainly if Jack Eichel's healthy, he's an 80-point player. He's the dynamic first-line center.
Now, there are a lot of teams that could certainly utilize this type of talent, and a healthy Jack Eichel could mean the world. And you know what, DB, you mentioned 80 points. I mean, a change of scenery, get him out of that environment, get him into a better environment. Look what's happening with Taylor Hall in Boston. You throw Jack Eichel onto another team, and suddenly he rejuvenates his career a little bit and gets to a 90-plus point performance. LA would be really interesting, and we know that the Kings have mentioned, both Rob Blake and Luc Robitaille have mentioned before, that they're willing to make moves for players that fit that age bracket, that could fit their style moving forward. Would this, I would imagine, this pretty much escalates the overall rebuild that happens in LA if they do come to terms on this.
A huge offseason for the Kings, Dave. They have to make moves. They have to bring established players. I've talked to guys on the team. They know it. They understand it. At least 2 or 3 NHL-proven players. Dave, 24th in offense. They don't have a second line. The issue with the Kings is, they didn't have a legitimate second line to start the season. They're playing their 55th game tonight. They still don't have a legitimate second line. So they have to solve that problem. Jack Eichel would solve that problem, right? You could surround them. And for the people who say you're mortgaging the future by trading 2 prospects for Jack Eichel and some picks, then you don't have the deepest prospect pool in the NHL. You can't have both. Either you have the deepest prospect pool, you reach into it, you make the deal for Eichel, or you really don't have a deep prospect pool. You can't say both at this point in time. So, yeah, and not only that, Dave, you got to sell tickets in Los Angeles. The Dodgers won the World Series. The Lakers are always in the playoffs. You have to create some excitement around this team. Jack Eichel would create excitement.
Yeah, we forget sometimes that this is a business, and more than just the on-ice hockey decisions have to be factored in here. And going back to Buffalo in that situation, they've got to figure out exactly what they're going to end up doing, not just with Jack Eichel, but they have other pieces they could potentially move that sounded this week like they wouldn't mind that possibility. Rasmus Ristolainen, who has been the poster boy of the rumor mill for the last 3 years, came out and said that he would welcome a change if that's the direction that they go. He's fine with it. And Sam Reinhart was very non-committal about his future with the club. Ristolainen has 1 year left on his deal. Reinhart is a restricted free agent this summer. Could you see a scenario where either of those guys are on Buffalo next year?
I could if the asking price isn't met, but they wouldn't be in this predicament had they made a great trade for Ryan O'Reilly. And that's the danger here, right? They're still undoing the mistakes Jason Botterill made. Had they made a great trade for Ryan O'Reilly to be a better team, we may not be having this conversation at all. So if they do trade them, that's why Jason Karmanos is a pivotal guy here. Kevin Adams is not a personnel guy. Karmanos is, If they move those guys, they have to bring back value. They have to make great trades here, and that would certainly help. But then again, it's having an open and honest conversation with these two players. I mean, Sam Reinhart looks like he's totally off board with this Buffalo Sabres, and he scored 25 goals this year. You need that type of player to help the rebuild. It's just a matter of mindset and attitude. Do these players want to come back and endure maybe a couple more seasons of losing before Buffalo gets back on track of winning?
The other thing they got to figure out, and Kevin Adams mentioned this, as well as Don Granato, is their goaltending. They've got to figure out what the future of their goaltending is going to be. Linus Ullmark is an unrestricted free agent this offseason, and as we've reported, he's pretty much looking towards at least testing the market. He hasn't closed the door on the Buffalo Sabres, and I'm sure they're going to have some conversations again now that the season is done. But they got to figure out that as well. Lots of questions, not enough answers yet in Buffalo, but I'm sure they're coming. Dennis Bernstein, I'm Dave Pagnotta. Thanks for checking us out here on the Fourth Period.